Hello, my name is Buyan and I'm a CG specialist at Chaos. In this tutorial, I will show you how you can easily create your own kitchen interior render from start to finish. We'll start off with an empty scene and figure out where we want to position our main assets. Then we'll adjust the camera, lighting, and materials to fit our desired look. And we'll finish the tutorial by drastically changing the image with some post-processing. For this tutorial, I decided to create a kitchen interior. Before we start building our scene, let's turn on the denoiser, which will give us a fast and accurate estimate of what our denoised image is going to look like. In the denoiser drop-down menu, you can find 3 types of denoisers. For this tutorial, we'll use the NVIDIA AI denoiser. But if you're working on a Mac OS, you can use the Intel denoiser. For the early stages of our project, these 2 denoisers give much faster initial feedback. But when it's time to render our production image, always switch to the V-Ray denoiser because of its fine detail preservation. Don't forget to increase the update effect to rapid so your denoiser kicks in immediately. When that's done, we are ready to start creating our interior. The first thing we need is to research what type of kitchen we want to create. Before deciding the material and colors for our kitchen, let's think about the structure first. So this decision depends completely on your taste. For this kitchen, I would like to create an L-shaped structure. This means our kitchen will be situated in the corner. The L-shaped kitchen gives you a lot of creative freedom, so we can add our own unique look. I like how this configuration looks, but the space feels a bit empty. So let's create a kitchen island in the middle. Just like that. When we like our current arrangement, it's time to create the detailed models for our example shapes. So far, so good. Let's start the interactive rendering mode and see how our scene is going to be rendered. While in the interactive mode, you can move the camera around and the VFB will update the new positions. It seems like that it's a bit too dark right now. We can easily change that by increasing the EV in the camera parameter menu. EV or exposure value can be controlled by this slider here. By increasing it, the image will become darker, and by decreasing it, it will become brighter. If you're not sure how to properly set the EV, you can always click the auto button here and V-Ray will automatically balance the light in your scene. Next up is adding some furniture and accessories. To help us with that task, we can use the Chaos Cosmos. This is our 3D library where we have hundreds of high-quality assets ready to be used. You can browse through the vast library from here, or you can search for a specific asset from here. There are not only 3D models, but also preset materials, HDRIs, and much more. For now, let's open the accessories section and search for something we can place on the table. When we pick a desired asset, you can click here and it will bring it in the scene. Now, when you left-click on your scene, it will be placed on the surface of where your mouse is. My goal for picking the right assets for our scene is to pick objects that have the same aesthetic regardless of the materials or color. That's because later on we'll add the proper materials to our models so everything looks cohesive. When we're all said and done with the additional detail, let's focus on the lighting. By default, in SketchUp we have a built-in sun. In the lighting tab, we can find the V-Ray properties. Here you can use the controls to properly position the sun. But if you don't have a specific plan on how to position your sun and you need some creative ideas, you can use the Light Gen tool. When you open the Light Gen tool, you will get a menu that will allow you to generate hundreds of lighting scenarios based on your scene type. As you can see, we can create light variations for an interior or an exterior. We have an interior, so let's select that. Here, you can choose to get variations with the V-Ray sun and sky. So let's add some variations and click Generate. After some time, you will see different types of light scenarios. If you like one of them, you can double-click on it and V-Ray will automatically take the settings and update the V-Ray sun and sky. So just test out different scenarios until you find the right one for your scene. This looks much better. We can see the sunlight coming inside, but notice how sharp the shadows are. That's because of the direct sunlight. If we want to minimize the sharpness of the shadows, we need to increase the size multiplier of the sun from here. That looks way better. With just the EV and the Light Gen tool, you can already get a great and photorealistic result. But if you would like to have a more artistic approach to lighting, you can use additional light sources to highlight specific areas in your interior. This is entirely an artistic decision. so there is no right or wrong way of lighting an interior space. Note that we will leave the light sources with a white color. Later on in the post-processing part, we will tweak some of their parameters. The first light sources we'll need is for the exterior assets. If outside is a bright sunny day, we will need more light casted on the trees and grass. So let's create two rectangular light sources and position them pointing towards the exterior. The next light sources will be casting light inside our house. I'll create two more rectangular lights and position them near the windows. This way, we'll simulate the sunlight coming in. But to properly simulate direct sunlight, we'll need to increase their directionality. This property causes the light to be concentrated in a smaller radius, as you can see in this example. Finally, a light source from inside the room. We will need this light so we have control over the overall light in the space. I'll add just a bit of intensity so it doesn't overexpose the interior. At this point, I feel that I'm starting to do some drastic changes to my scene, so I will turn on the history panel in the VFP and start saving my progress. This way, when I do a more radical change, I can compare it with my previous version. So this was before we set up the additional lights, and this is after. Looks way better. Next up is materials. Materials are always a very tricky part in the production process, but if we have a color palette in mind, everything will work out in the end. Sometimes when I work on a project and I don't have any inspiration, I start looking at nature. Because of its diversity and harmony, I always end up copying some of its qualities. For this interior, I took inspiration from a pine wood forest, where the main accents are pine green and brown wood, complemented by gold and marble. So let's head over to the Chaos Cosmos and pick some materials. When you download the desired material, you can find it in the asset editor. There, you can select your object and apply it to selection. I'll use the same method to add some materials to the rest of the table. For the floor, I'll pick a material from the wooden flooring section. You can notice that right next to the name of the material, there is a number followed by centimeters. The real-life size of most Cosmos materials is specified in its name. V-Ray automatically reads the dimensions from the material name and auto-adjusts the material size in SketchUp, so you don't have to worry about the scale of the patterns. But if you would like to make an artistic decision and scale up or down the pattern of a certain material, you can head over to the UVW randomizer node and change it from there. In this case, I like how the floor looks with the original scaling, so I'll stick with that one. For the pine green color, I'll use the kitchen cabinets and curtains. Let's focus on the cabinets first. I'll create a new material from here and add a green color. But I don't want them to just be a flat green color. In nature, there's always a lot of detail. In the real world, these cabinets will be created from a plank of wood and then colored in green. So to emphasize the original wooden material, we can add a fade around the corners. To do that, we can combine both materials into a V-Ray blend material and create a mask that will blend between the two materials. For the mask, we can create a V-Ray curvature texture. To see the results, let's apply the new blend material. Because we haven't adjusted the curvature texture, we're getting predominantly the wood material. By moving the radius amount, we can start seeing more of the green coating. I think that this amount works best for my case. Now let's switch our attention to the curtains. These curtains were modeled outside of SketchUp and then imported as a V-Ray proxy. As you can see, it already has materials on it, but I would like to modify them a bit to better fit our scene. In the real world, if there is a direct sunlight that is being cast behind them, some of the light will spill through. To simulate that effect, we can create a two-sided material and add our original material here. Now just by using this slider, we can increase or decrease the translucency effect. Next up is the marble. Going back to the Chaos Cosmos, we can pick a good looking marble material and apply it to the countertop and kitchen tiles. Note to always apply rock materials to areas that make sense. There are a lot of examples online, so don't hesitate to take inspiration from there. Now, all that is left is the golden accent. I'll download the golden material from the Chaos library and apply it to every metal surface, like the sink and the kitchen hood. Our goal now is to see if all the colors are well balanced and matching our original color scheme. If you feel like your composition is not balanced enough, you can always add additional colors with accessories and light sources. I think we're almost done. Now all that is left is to add the finishing touches with some color corrections. But before we do that, let's add a light mix render element which will help us along the way. The light mix will allow us to change the intensity and color of light sources while we are rendering, so we don't have to wait for updating changes. In the right panel of the VFB, we have the layer tree. Just like in Photoshop, we can stack different color corrections to make our image pop. The first thing we're going to add is a filmic tone mapper. With this color correction, we'll balance out the shadows and the highlights of our image. Notice this section of the image, where there is a lot of direct sunlight. The filmic tone mapper corrects the highlights so they aren't that intense. Next, let's add an exposure color correction to brighten up the image a bit. Finally, let's add a curve color correction and increase the highlight tones by bending the top parts of our curve. A little trick you can use for interiors is to put on the lens effects, so we can see some bloom and glare around the very bright spots in our image. This is a very important step in making your image photorealistic. In the real world, when we take a picture of a very exposed surface like the sun, we'll always get a bloom effect. We should apply the same logic in our 3D render. And just like that, we created our daytime scene. But what if we want to create a night version? Let me show you how easy it is. We create one spherical light beneath the lamps and one rectangular light coming from the back of the room. Now let's render our result. As you can see, it's still very sunny, but now inside the light mix we have all the light sources. So now one by one we can disable the daylight lamps and leave only the night ones. To lower down the sky exposure, we can change the environment intensity and give it a blue tint. I'll also change the color of the night light sources. And just like that, we were able to get these stunning results. I'm pretty happy with how the kitchen turned out. All it took was proper planning of the space and some help from the Chaos Cosmos. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and I hope you learned something valuable today.